name is Scott Desgrosseilliers from Wicked Reports. So I'm really excited to talk to him because in this day and age where so much of PPC and digital marketing is becoming automated, the automations do need good data about what it is that's working for you. And so how do you get that good data in place? Is it GA4 or not? Maybe GA4 has some big issues. We'll talk about that. What are the alternatives? What are the attribution models you should be choosing? How does first party play into all of this? So lots of good questions, and we've got a great expert joining us to answer all of these today. So with that, let's get rolling with this episode of PPC Town Hall. Scott, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Fred. Anytime I can be referred to as an expert, that's a good feeling. Very few things I'm an expert in life, but marketing attribution is one of them.
Okay, well, if you're good at one thing and you make a living on that, that's not a bad thing, right?
Yeah, that's what I've realized.
So talk to us a little bit about how you became such an expert on that topic.
Well, many years ago, I think I've calculated almost 30,000 hours I put in on marketing attribution.
Of course, the guy who's talking to us about measurement knows exactly how many hours he put in.
Yeah. So I calculated it once a while ago, and then I kind of keep a log and keep track just because it was fascinating. I'd spent that long and I was still interested in it. A long time ago, a good friend of mine had started a lobster company, Get Maine Lobster, where he would sell food online. And he tried out Facebook. This was back in 2006. No, wait a minute. Was it 2006? Oh my God. No, I'm sorry, 2013. 2013. And he said, hey, Facebook doesn't work for Lobster. And I said, why is that? He said, I spent $4,000. I only made one sale. And I thought, perhaps it's just that they're going to take time to buy. Let me try to find you some software and install it, because I liked, analytics, and I was always doing data consulting, and I couldn't find anything that was going to track his results. This is back, 2013. And so I cobbled together this idea, very complex way to track some clicks. And it turned out that he would break even on Facebook when he would do the ad spend. But then if we looked at it with a 90-day lens, people would buy off his emails or return visits, and he was actually making 10-1 on his money. So the light bulb went off for him that, wow, Facebook could make me a lot of money. And he now spends a couple $100,000 a month on the channel, which he only spent $4,000 when he started. So the data really worked. And then word spread through just a few of his friends and a few people I knew at Infusionsoft, which is now called Keep, which is now called Thrive. And all of a sudden I had a consulting business that turned into, I needed some software. And that's how Wicked Reports was born.
Nice. So basically, don't measure too closely because you might miss the bigger picture.
100%. I mean, it always blows my mind when people are trying to act on intraday like it's like they're trading stocks, which I used to be a day trader. So I do know how to do that and enjoy it. And the conversion data is on a lag. The ad platforms update their conversion reporting up to 72 hours after the fact. So to say that, the algorithm's being good to me today, I'm going to spend more, is tricky, because that algorithm might be good to you because you sent an email today, people bought, and yes, paid did help drive it, but it was from a day, 2 days, a week, a month ago, and it's just now showing up, and it may or may not show up in the reporting. So I find that time lag is real, and not a lot of people understand it. And it's a big advantage, and it's a competitive advantage if you do, because you can spend where audiences look like they're not converting and, ignore some other ones that are inflated.
And talk a bit more about time lag on the different platforms. When I was at Google, the time lag was significant before things would hit the reports. But then we would say, well, it may be a couple of days before the data is there. But in reality, in most cases, the data would hit the reports within 20 minutes. What does that? But then I know nowadays Optimizer works with Amazon as well, and Amazon does have more glitchiness in their reporting, so it's less consistent. And they also throw it away after 90 days. So unless you have a tool that saves it, it's kind of hard to look back at what happened last year and what do we learn from that. So talk a bit about the different platforms that you work with and how that differs between them.
Yeah, well, the biggest lag we see is on Meta, in terms of not how fast Meta necessarily reports their conversions, but the time between a click to a conversion.
Mhm.
So we find that sometimes it can be, we have lifetime attribution forwards and backwards. Like you may not, that's not always you're going to use that as analysis. If something that happened 4 years ago isn't very relevant, but we can report if you want to say, hey, where did all the day's sales come from? Sometimes we'll show in Meta, that lead was generated 4 years ago on Meta that bought today, particularly around the holidays with Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So we can see conversion lag of up to a year in terms of the click to conversion time. Uh, it it depends on the price point. It depends on maybe you just ran a great sale that finally struck a nerve, or they clicked a long time and then you retargeted them on a different platform that got them re-engaged. So Meta would be the most time lag to click to conversion.
I don't know why, but this morning I was thinking about cars and how nowadays it's the Scout, the new SUV that's coming out. They're basically taking $100 deposits and collecting somebody's email address. But none of these cars are going to be available for at least a year. And the Cybertruck was the same thing. I mean, how many years between they started collecting the quote unquote conversions and then actually delivering the product, right? But I find it fascinating that nowadays there seems to be this shift to actually collecting an upfront payment as part of that initial conversion event. And then there's a huge time lag to the actual conversion. And I suppose that ties a bit into creating the buzz and the demand. Hey, it's exclusive to be on that list, and it just gets you higher on the priority list if you do like the product. But it's also about collecting first party data, right? If you have these longer sales cycles. So any thoughts on that? Like, is that a shift that you're seeing as well in the industry? How are people thinking about these long conversion cycles?
Yeah, I mean, the first party data, not only collecting it, but then tracking that first party data conversion, because the cost per clicks just keep going up. I mean, they're probably not coming down because Google and Meta and all the other platforms have to show growth. So they're not likely to suddenly cut the cost heavily on the cost per click. So yeah, I mean, even for an e-commerce brand, I mean, you're paying a lot for that traffic, and people aren't not necessarily going to buy on the very first time they've encountered your brand. So it makes sense to try to capture the first party data. One, because you can market to them on owned media for free, but then also you can retarget very precisely, upload the unconverted leads. So, I mean, I find also that getting that it's a really high conversion signal to get someone to submit their email. So you have all kinds of clicks flying in, but the ones that if you can't get the purchase, if you can get the email submission, sometimes you can scale that ad a lot cheaper because the other people that are looking that are bidding on that audience in that moment in the purchase cycle don't see enough sales, so the price can stay low. And then you're bidding on it because you're collecting first party data that you're then closing a couple weeks or a month later or however long it takes for your particular conversion cycle. But then you're able to keep accumulating it if you can track that, stitch that together, the first party capture to the sale on a first party capture from paid into sale on email or SMS in particular.
And I think there's an underlying really core key point that advertisers need to keep in mind, which is sometimes you look at your CPCs and you're like, how is it that I'm paying so much for a click and I can't get a positive return on ad spend? Like, how is it that everybody else seems to be bidding so much higher and making money on this? Or are they just throwing money down the drain? But I think what it comes down to is, like you're saying, they're just more holistically measuring what's happening. And so they do have a better understanding that it's not just that one time intraday event that leads to the conversion. And because they understand where that click fits into the broader picture, they're able to bid more for it because they know it does lead eventually to more value than you might think at that instant in time. Right. And so the risk is that if you don't put these measurement models and attribution models in place, you're sort of playing on a different field than smarter competitors. And you're always going to be behind them in terms of bids. And if you're using smart bidding, then smart bidding is also going to bid lower. And you're not going to have the position, you're not going to get the volume, and your competitors are going to win and you're going to lose because you didn't focus on measurement.
100% on all that. I mean, that sometimes people are throwing away money because they have huge budgets. Particularly the bigger the company, the more likely they are just bidding on so much they can't keep track of it. But anyone spending, under $1 million a month usually has a grip on what's going on or is trying to manage that well. And if you see that you're getting outbid on things, yeah, it's likely they're either taking some concept of LTV into account or some wider measurement window, or their offer is just working better. Now, I mean, particularly a subscription brand. Let's just say you're selling $100 a month. A really brilliant marketer we had that was doing supplements, and he would start bidding, raising his bids and budget on Meta when he was still showing a negative return on ad spend in the first 30 days. But if the trend was good, because he knew he was going to get so much renewals, that he was trying to gobble up this audience before any, because supplements is cutthroat, the bidding. I mean, everyone's selling powder. And so he would go in and bid it up and try to clean out the whole audience before anyone else could get there, because once he'd found it was before it was even fully profitable, because he was going to look at it with not just a wider click window on the attribution, but the LTV. He was going to take 90 days of LTV into account, account for his churn, but then assume that one sale was really 2.5 or 2 3/4 sales. So instead of bidding and saying, I'm going to try to purchase a customer for $50 because I need to immediately I'm selling it for 100 and I want to try to make $50, he'd say, I'm going to bid 120 because I'm going to actually make $270 on the average customer in 3 months. And so that's rough the first month you do it, but you do it a couple months in a row, and then it's like earning compound interest. You've got all those recurrings happening, plus you're bidding enough, you're having this flood of new subscribers coming in. And they scaled to a 9-figure brand, with a couple strategies, but one of them was really intelligent, bidding high for the initial purchase, which that works if your business model supports it.
So how do you know that your business model supports it? How do you have the confidence to make that bet? And do you think that's different if you're an agency doing it on behalf of a client versus in-house?
Two things on that. One to know is you look at your historical customer cohorts. So you take all your customer, if you're doing it, it doesn't matter if you're just getting repeat buyers or you hope you're getting repeat, or heck, you just had, Black Friday, Cyber Monday and all the Christmas stuff. You look at you pull out your revenue data and you look at the very first purchase date of each, just say customer email or customer name. And then you aggregate all the other, then each month after that month they buy, you append any additional value. And so you look and see historically, how much lift have I gotten from my customers over in the past? Because if you haven't done it in the past, it's unlikely you're going to just magically do it in the future. You should work on it if you haven't, but that's the way you use history. And then ideally you have history with attribution. So you know by channel or by audience, which ones are more valuable, because it's likely the higher cost per click audience is because they're more desirable. If you know there's a pool of people making $500,000 a year and Meta's figured it out, well, they're going to charge $10 a click for that audience because everybody wants that audience. So they might cost more because they have more money to spend, or they're in more lucrative careers or in a more lucrative zip code. They're going to cost more to get their attention. It's just supply and demand. What was the second part of your question? Because that was an interesting one too. How am I going to know that I can do that?
Yeah, so it was also agency versus in-house.
Okay, so the big thing with the agencies clients, we work with 400 agencies now, and it's getting alignment of expectations with the customer. So I have a whole course coming out on my measurement and data decision philosophy. But what I found was that you have to agree and get aligned on expectations before you start just running out and throwing out bids and just trying to drive revenue with your proven playbook. Agency, I got a playbook. I just closed this customer. They're going to follow my playbook. I'm going to make them all this money. You got to say, hey, we're going to use this measurement tool, whatever, it could be anything, but we're going to agree on a time period and a way to measure. And then for a sale, are we going to include any LTV or not? Because that can affect my bidding. And then how much an average customer has been worth to you over a not lifetime value, but a defined period of value. So short-term value, because everyone's going to say, oh, I have $8,000 customer LTV. You can bid $800 on a customer. Then you bid 800, and well, the customer is only worth $1,000 in month one. And there's something like, wait a minute, we're losing money after we fulfill. So you got to get really clear with a client on how much value am I allowed to accrue, because it's going to affect everything in terms of the paid go-to-market strategy.
So that raises two questions for me. The chicken and the egg problem. So you said look at your historical data to make decisions on how much you can invest in the ad platforms. But oftentimes the ad platform, I believe, is the way that you get that new product into market, because nobody's going to buy your powder in such a competitive landscape unless you're doing something, right? So what is that something? What is the flywheel in this case? How do you get that data?
So you'll still have your sales data to show you the value of the cohort. So you're just trying to say, regardless of source, when people buy, are they buying again? And if so, how long does it take and how much more money
Right.
are they spending?
But I've got some powder in my kitchen. I'm going to put that up on. I'm going to start selling it with all these health benefits after this call here. How do I get to anyone? How do I get these initial sales? Right, like I'm an ads guy, so I'd be like, well, let me go put it on Meta, on Google, or is the assumption that you've sold it through stores? Like
No,
I
you'd be
think
on Meta and
like,
Google first, likely. So you'd spend a ton of time on conversion rate optimization, getting that perfect page. And then, I mean, the reason why all these things are out there is the powder is quite cheap to get. You know, you can buy it in
right.
bulk, like bulksupplements.com. You can go buy in bulk there, mix them up, hopefully test them.
New business idea. Okay, so that's interesting. So basically, you're saying you still have to use the ad channels and your bids will be imperfect in the beginning, but that
Oh,
gives you the data. And now with 2-3 months of that data on what's actually producing sales, you get a better understanding of what those customers are worth. And now you can move towards correct bidding, where
correct.
you're optimizing your business. Got it.
Yeah. I mean, there's always that leap of faith and that intuition and the, particularly when starting, there's no
Yeah.
like foolproof way to get going. Anyone that tells you that
And
probably
and
hasn't
here
started
I
it.
know. And here I was hoping you'd have the magic bullet,
Yeah.
get all the data
Well,
with
you
no
want
cost.
to,
But
I
so
mean, assuming you're going to get repeat buyers, which if the products, not every market is, but a lot of them will, then you want to calculate back your break even and make sure you're not bidding more than break even after fulfillment. But that would be your point where if your cost to acquire the customer is higher than that, then you've got to go readjust. But you don't want it. You need to give yourself enough time frame, particularly if you're a new brand going to market, but any brand. You can't launch an ad and say, "Hey, my target is $50 to acquire the customer," and then if day one is $70, you're like, "Oh, the ad didn't work." Like you got to give it a couple of weeks. You got to have the budget for a couple of weeks to run a fair test.
okay, and so I said there were two questions. So my second question that you made me think of was sort of the conversion lag could be a high number, right? So it takes a while for the conversion to happen. You then said, well, as you start to see the repeat business append the value to your data so that you start to understand that a certain customer had a higher lifetime value. My question is about bringing that back to the bid management systems. And so let's take Google as an example. How long do you recommend you update your conversions? Because the offline conversion import functionality does have a relatively long window. It's not
90
super, I can't
days.
remember. It's 90
90
days,
days.
right?
We
So
have an integration with that. We built the very first one with Google, so I'm very intimately familiar with it.
nice. So,
um,
um,
so
so
they have a
like,
90-day lag on that, right? You
yeah,
don't. So, and what we do is we'll store the. Not everything has a GCLID, but if we have a GCLID or another identifier, we'll hold on to that and then check your shopping cart every day or your Stripe or Shopify, whatever. And each day, if there's a sale from a customer, and when we work our attribution back, if we say, "Oh, look, they have Google offline conversion tracking," I'll call OCT for now, Google OCT enabled, and we have an ID, we'll go tell Google, "Hey, guess what? This click's actually worth more money." We do a lot there with Google OCT. We allow you to only send first clicks attributed. We allow you to exclude campaigns if you don't want Google bidding more on brand. You can exclude brand conversion, so we won't send those because you're always trying to tell the black box what you want, which is
yeah,
easier said than done. But for the lag, I mean, one way I like to text, and we have this report already, but you could do it on your own, is you export out your CRM emails and create dates. Then you export out your shopping cart first purchase dates and emails and cross-reference to get the date diff. And then that will tell you how long it takes people to buy after they've opted in. You've captured the first party. That'll give you an idea of the lag after you've earned the lead, which may or
Right.
may not come on the first, second, third, fourth click, whatever it takes. So that gives you an idea of a ballpark of how long, if people didn't convert right away, they took more than a day from joining my Klaviyo until they showed up in Shopify. How long did they take? And then you get like an average of that out,
Right.
or a mean. You get a distribution and account like every week, and then you got to double it, because if, let's say you're bidding on, let's say it takes a week for people to convert. Well, day one, you captured those people. That's one day that's going to take till day 8 for that many people to convert. And then day 2. So you got to like treat them as little mini cohorts. So it's lag's a
Right.
complex
It's
topic.
challenging.
Yeah.
And that's exactly one of the reasons. So in our rule engine or reporting, we have custom date ranges. And one of the things that we allow is how many days should we push back your reports so that you're not making that mistake that you just said, which is on day 2, you assume that your conversion rate is complete when it's going to take another 7 days past that for that day to be reported, right? So it looks like yesterday was really expensive and didn't really lead to a lot of conversions. But you can probably already predict sort of how many conversions will come off of that from historical insights. But if you're going to be reporting it back to a client, say that you're an agency, I mean, if you send reports on the first of the month, well, guess what? If you have a 7-day conversion lag, then those last 7 days were incorrect within that, right? And that's going to make it look like you actually did a really lousy job during that month. And so I completely agree with all the things you're saying there. It's so important to understand conversion lag and then put it into your attribution and your bidding and your reporting. It plays into everything.
Yeah. The biggest lag I've seen was a company that does cosmetic procedures, and they run ads to get people to come get free, like, I don't know, makeover or something. And
Mhm.
then they want to get them in for the real, like, cosmetic, whatever they're going to do. And we have a feature where you can just track the ROAS of in the cost to acquire customer, the month of the click, and then you can see the next 3 months what those clicks value did, and it would triple their return on ad spend. So if
Yeah.
they just looked at it even from Meta or whatever, it looked like, not bad. But when they added the next 3 months, when the people got the free service or whatever, and then went in and redid their face or whatever they were doing, they're making a fortune. And that's where measurement was a key factor. I mean, they still have a good product and they have a good funnel. Like, you still need to be good at marketing, but this is where data unlocks a massive channel that otherwise would look very so-so.
Yeah. Now, and this is a very specific question, but I get conflicting answers from even Google on this. So with the 90-day period in which you can restate conversions, it sounds like you're restating it every time you see new activity happening. Some people at Google say it's more important to just consistently do it on the same schedule. So every like 2 weeks after the initial conversion, update the value and then don't do it again, because that way their smart bidding our algorithms get to understand, oh, it looks like there's sort of this gap of 2 weeks after which something happens. And they say it has an easier time to process and understand that than if the values keep changing on a daily basis. I've also heard them say, really focus on the first 2 days. That's when you need to restate it. And if you don't have the actual values, tell us a predictive value, because that short date range, there's almost like a time decay model inside of the algorithm updates, right? So it's going to weigh the recent changes much more heavily than something that's reported 90 days after the fact. So in your experience, like, have you seen a trend? Is there anything to any of this?
So what we found is when people have OCT turned on, and this is over, hundreds of customers, their average, they'll do 9% better than those that don't. So 9% is not insignificant. It's not like
Yeah.
they're rich, but 9% better is a lot.
Yeah.
So that's generally how they'll do. And that's based on how we do it, which is we only update once a day. We don't do real time. Once a day, we say, hey, OCT, hey, Google, here's all the conversion data for all the clicks, for all the new sales conversions for any clicks we've tracked in the past. So that's just how we do it. Once we detect it, we send it up. And it's working some, 9%. But yeah, when we built it with them, that was the strategy we had. But then someone new takes over the bidding algorithm and tweaks it. It's frustrating because I would hang on those Zoom, I'm not one for hanging on a lot of webinars, but I'd be on theirs every month if they were telling us how they change things and what we should do. It's tricky to get.
Yeah.
'Cause, yeah, two different people in Google tell you different stories, and then you're like, well, geez, I don't know what to build. As long as the
Yeah.
customers are
Right.
getting value, and then I'll like, I know I've done what I can. So yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know what's going on in that. Always that I just know when we have revenue, we tell them when we can, and we hope that they're making the right decision with the algorithm. But then we allow influencing of it, of only sending certain types of conversions if you wish.
Yeah. So let the data speak for itself, right? The people at Google may say a variety of things, but I think oftentimes it's a generalization of what's happening. And do remember, every advertiser is different, and what works for the average may not work for you. So by having a good strategy around data and, like you said, test, including, excluding different things, and see what works and what gives you the biggest lift. All right, great stuff, Scott. I did also have a few questions related to some blogs that you recently wrote. So the first one that I saw was in the last quarter. You wrote about email data as first party data. So email marketing benchmarks, and basically, I think you were saying use benchmarks to guide your strategy. Can you talk a bit more about both? I think the first party data component and how benchmarks fit into all of this.
Sure. I have strong opinions on benchmarks. So the benchmarks I don't really love are industry or channel wide. Like we still report them because people love to read them. But just because let's say you're selling food online. If I say the average food cost per click is $2 and the average CAC is $50 and yours are different, then you start thinking, oh, I need to do something. And I don't think that's relevant. I think the benchmarks you need to use are your own. I like to think of the analogy of weight loss or getting in shape. Like if my 90-year-old grandmother can walk around the block, that's a great achievement for her. That's a disaster if that's all I can do. Everything's relative. And so I like to train our clients to use benchmarks to then to first of all get a realistic thing of what they've done, so then they can set a goal that's actually possibly achievable, and then measure them against themselves. They're trying to beat themselves based on how they've done in the past, just like you do with a diet or in the gym or running or whatever. And so specifically with email, because where it's your owned media, it's a free conversion if you can get it. You have this wealth of data. And so like if you send an email out, you can learn a lot based on your benchmarks. If there's a lot more clicks than your normal email to that segment, then that means that email subject line, that email message, if they clicks, that email offer was good. And if there's less than normal, then that means something was off. And then the same thing with the sales off an email. If they click the email and buy, which happens a lot, email's a great channel for people. If you have a low amount of clicks and a high amount of sales, then that tells me as a data person, I have a great offer. I have to optimize this email to get more people to use it, but I should store it and reuse this email because I found something that sells. Or if it's I can't because it was a one-time sale, well, analyze the structure and the image and what was my hook. Like learn from the past what type of emails. It can be less creative, but it's more valuable. And I got this idea because back when I was, this is 2013, Infusionsoft, now it was a big CRM, would fly me in to be the data guy for their accelerators. With companies would come in, pay 15 grand, get a whole marketing thing done for them, but they're already successful. And they'd have these beautiful, sometimes one guy had this beautiful set of emails written. He'd pay 10 grand for them. And I tracked him for him. And I was like, I got a bad news. I was like, you're only selling like a 2 or 3 emails with these pretty emails, and your text emails are selling 10 plus sales. And he was like, so upset. He's like, but I paid $10,000 for those. I go, they're beautiful. No one cares though. I'm sorry. You didn't pay me them, so it's not my fault. It's not that. I mean, they look great. And that shows you got to test the data. But then I knew that they weren't good because I had a benchmark for him of how his average email would do given how many people it sent to and how many clicked on it. I was like, you got to stop sending these right away because it's just like that's where your revenue dips because he's at an accelerator trying to improve his revenue. And I was like, you gotta go back to your old emails. He didn't like that. I don't know, he didn't necessarily like that news, but that was the story. So
Yeah, and I think that also speaks to teams and people want to be busy, so they keep doing efforts in the same areas. But ultimately, you do hit a point at which sometimes these experiments or innovations are actually going to hurt your performance. And so then the question becomes, well, listen, if I've done A/B testing on my ads and I've done 5 rounds of optimizations, and every time I do a test, it reduces the results, you're actually doing yourself a disservice, right? Because that 50% of traffic you put into the experiment has gotten fewer sales. And if time after time it keeps losing, like, what are we learning here? Are we learning that you're bad at experimentation, or are you learning that you've kind of reached the limit of what's possible in your space? But that becomes the more important question to answer at that point, rather than, hey, what's the sixth test that we're going to do? And again, kill off a bunch of conversions that we would have gotten if we hadn't done anything, right? But going to your boss and saying, I didn't do anything and we had good results again, that's not going to fly, right?
Yes. Yeah, because there is that case. I call it finding the meta sweet spot. So these ad sets only have so many people in them. They generally aren't infinitely expanding. In some cases they are, but if, like, let's just say you do a basic lookalike, or if you got a keyword search, you only have so much impression share. Maybe there's only so many keywords that you've dialed in that are going to work, and there's only so much impressions you can bid for till it's not profitable. So people just want to scale, 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 but sometimes you got to keep. It's more like
Yeah.
plateaus. You get to the next plateau. Like Meta will be like, well, I can spend 400 a day, but when I try to scale to 1,000 a day on this ad set, I don't make any. It goes down. What's wrong with the algorithm? It's like, no, there's just no more people in there that are willing to buy. You found this, dial it down to the dollar amount per day that makes your profit, and then you move on to the next one. You just got to get a bunch of those going.
So I have a thought on incrementality here, right? So you could go from a $400 daily budget to a $1,000 daily budget, and the ad platform may tell you that you're still going to get conversions below the cost per acquisition target you have, or within the return on ad spend targets that you have. But think about the incrementality in this case, because that average comes from taking everything together, and maybe that incremental one sale that you got comes at a higher price point than you could afford. So going back to all the examples about nutritional supplements, if you know you're going to make $800 on that customer lifetime, that next click could come at, it's unlikely, but say $900. So that was a wasted click, right? Even if that still gives you more volume, that your average cost per acquisition is still good. That new click was just too expensive. And that then leads into a question, which I know you do have thoughts on, which is profitability, right? How do we get to profitable campaigns as opposed to just using the ad platform metrics like TACO or ACOS, ROAS, which are not really business metrics, right? These are advertising metrics. How do we tie that back to something a business cares about, which is something like profit?
Yeah, so it's good to have a North Star metric that say, before we get into all the nitty gritty of the optimizations, which, I mean, I do love to do that, what's going to be our North Star business metric, which MER or blended ROAS is a good one. Blended ROAS, looking at all your ad spend and all your revenue, no matter where it's coming from, and saying, where do I need to hit where I'm going to be? And you got to align with the business stakeholder. Where is it going to be that I'm like ridiculously happy and want to increase ad spend? Where is it going to be like your job's at risk? And where is it like business as usual? It's good enough, but please try to improve it. And you try to get those base guidelines in place before. Or if it's not blended ROAS, maybe that'd be one example that I like, because then if you're selling on Amazon, which many brands are, and it's a black box over there, but you're running a lot of Google and Facebook and you're convinced that they're bouncing to Amazon because of Prime, then if you do blended ROAS over all the channels, you can still show that it's working. I mean, it's a high level working, because their Facebook, then you can say, well, my Facebook, I'm going to use Meta. I say Facebook still a lot. I'm old school.
Yeah.
If you're going to use Meta to like drive new traffic, and then you're going to use your search to drive the immediate demand, but then they're going to bounce to Amazon, you've got to have a strategy in place that measures that loss of signal. And so that MER covers that well. MER, blended ROAS, covers that. That's one I like. And then another one could be like, well, I only want to use paid for new customer acquisition, in which case, first of all, you've got to be able to segment between new versus repeat, which not a lot of tools can do. And then you have to then Then you got to use your benchmark to say, well, how, if you can get it, what has new customers been to acquire? Because if you run a normal, like, oh, I had 20 sales today and it cost me $2,000, I'm paying $100 a sale, $100 a customer. No, because a bunch of repeats are in there. And so really the cost to acquire the new is a lot more than you think. Because if you see your cost to acquire a customer without knowing new versus repeat, the odds are fair that at least half of them are repeat if you weren't segmenting well enough. Or on Meta's case, the AI is ignoring your ad sets and retargeting anyway. I don't know if you've seen that. It's been like an epidemic.
I haven't seen that.
So
But if you say it's happening, then I trust you. So we'll take a look at that. Hey, but it says so Wicked Reports, I assume, has that distinction between new and returning. That's one of
yeah,
the great features there. So you also kind of spoke about like the loss of data signal, or and I think what you're talking about there is the fact that say you advertise on Meta and then eventually the person ends up on Amazon and the conversion happens on the Amazon platform, you don't have your conversion tracking pixel on there, right? And so that usually ends up breaking data. And so we live in a world where we have the large ecosystems like Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, Google. They each have their own walled garden as far as protecting that data. And they have to do it partly because privacy, but also really because that keeps you locked into their platform and they're going to be able to show better measurements as far as like what they contributed. So what are some of the solutions? And I know there's clean rooms coming out from different platforms. Are these giving us ability to look holistically, or is it a situation where you really do have to have expertise in looking in each platform and doing some hand waving and maybe some estimations to figure out what really is happening?
yeah, it's number two. So, like for example, with the Amazon loss, you'd have to use MER or blended ROAS, and then you still benchmark how you're doing in Meta and Google because there's still even though there's some loss of sale, you still benchmark that your direction is still directionally accurate. Let's just say you're losing 10 sales a day from Meta that's bouncing to Amazon. If your MER is still good, then you just benchmark your Facebook where you're at and then use that as your baseline and then make ad budget decisions that way. And as long as the numbers, even though you have some signal loss, are moving in the right direction, that's what matters. What matters is that you're improving your business by using the data, not that every last conversion is accounted for. It's really an
Yeah.
optimization tool is what it should be.
There's another blog post today I wanted to talk about. So, exploring attribution models for improving return on investment. Attribution models obviously have shifted quite a bit over the last couple of years. Hopefully, nobody listening today is still doing last click. I'm suspecting you're also not a fan of that one. But talk a little bit about what are the modern attribution models and what's working these days.
I like last click for two things: email, SMS conversions, because they should be the last click. Or if you want to just check if your tracking's working from the previous day. But otherwise, yeah, you can't make
Safeguard.
big bet. I know of some brands that actually do pretty well based on last click, and it's mind blowing what they do. That's just what they like to do.
But
No,
let me actually so on that point, I do think if you're a big brand, things are generally easier because you have the brand, right? And I think
yeah,
it's oftentimes big brands come in and say, "Oh my God, marketing is so easy," and like we never got into a different attribution model because we didn't have to. And sure, but you have a luxury that most of the people listening today don't have. Not everyone has that kick-ass brand that everybody already knows.
yes. Yeah, and if you got the great creative team that has viral creative, so then your brand is top of mind. That's really hard to do.
Yeah,
uh,
it's the
well,
dream.
so one thing I noticed when I first started building some models out was that if I did a pure multi-touch model only and just shared the credit across every point, it diluted the impact of the more powerful conversion points along that path or the more important clicks. And so my task was, how do I give you data that's attributed accurately that I can transparently show who it was and what they did? But when you make changes based on on the data reported, you're going to grow your business versus everything looking somewhat bland. If you have like 10 touch points, you sell something for $100, everything's worth 10. that can be not look very profitable in some cases. And then you'd be like, I know I'm making money, but now everything you're telling me looks bad from a pure multi-touch shared credit. So it was this company, well, they're now called Tier 11, this media buyer over there, Ralph Burns. He was scaling this fitness lady at home called the Betty Rocker. And the strategy was, we're going to target cold traffic to go to her blog. Then the people that view her blog, we're going to target them. We're going to retarget them to opt in for first party data. It was just called get their email back then. They didn't have the fancy first party data. We're going to get their email to join the challenge. And then on the challenge, we're going to try to get them to buy with email. So it was like a perfect thing. So for so they needed 3 different attribution models. You needed first click to say what drove first clicks and then hold on to them. And then if they buy down the road after these 30-day challenge, track back to these cold clicks. And then what is working best to get people to join the challenge? Because that's a big conversion right there. Okay, I'm going to listen to this lady on my phone 30 days and do jumping jacks and push-ups and whatever. I mean, she has a great program. I'm making light of it. And then, okay, and she didn't have SMS back then, what email is going to work? And that was how I originally started thinking about, I need to basically score. It's keeping score. How am I going to keep score so that this guy who knows how to buy media is going to be able to scale this brand? And he scaled her like 20x. She went from like a lifestyle business to like a staff and office and the whole 9 yards. And
Nice.
and it was good advertising, but the measurement really guided them. And so I like to look at it almost like a sports analogy. If you win the game, well, overall, that's the point of business to win. But then if you win American football 41-38, well, your offense had great measurement, but your defense is terrible. So you got to go fix the defense. And the same thing with attribution. Like, is my top of the funnel working? Is my middle funnel first party data capture working? And then is my bottom funnel working? You apply the attribution models based on, just like a coach on a team. Where am I trying to improve? Is my offense weak? Is my defense, or is it my kicker? That's how I try to apply it more than trying to, because if I'm just mathematically, I mean, the math adds up, but if I just try to be mathematical purist and say everything's going to get 0.12 credit or whatever, you're not going to get enough insight. So we have different models based on, you tell us what your intention is. What's your intention behind this campaign? You trying to get leads? You're trying to just find new eyeballs. Everyone's trying to sell, but is it just please sell some stuff, Google? We have an attribution model for that.
Yeah.
Then we use multi-touch because you don't know. So we match the intention and strategy to a specific model. Then that gives you the right measurement to determine how to optimize.
That makes sense. Yeah, and so like have these multiple attribution models and different ways of measuring. And in Google Ads, you can set that up, and then the decision becomes like in your sports analogy. Hey, we're playing a team next week that actually has a pretty weak offense. So maybe we're going to put in place the attribution model based on, we don't need to be that strong on scoring points. So maybe you rest some of the players that will be more critical in the week after, right? But you have all of these data sources available to deploy them at the right time when you think that makes strategic sense. I don't know if that analogy makes sense,
Yeah,
but
no, it does work. Yeah, because certain keywords like brand would look good at last touch. Brand wouldn't be good for first touch. That's for sure, unless you're like household name, and then you don't really need to worry about a lot if you're a household name.
exactly. Hey, and there's another blog post I wanted to talk about. So GA4. After Universal Analytics, which was so easy to use and just had a completely different methodology of looking at things, I think people still struggle with GA4. And you've pointed out in your blog some of the challenges around that. But talk to us a little bit about what are those biggest challenges and what are the alternatives, and maybe where does Wicked fit into that?
Sure. Yeah, back when Universal, we used to pull in some of the data even way back when we first started, but now I wouldn't trust GA4 or put in there. Not that they're intentionally trying to mistrust you, just the way it's set up. It's just I don't get it. I don't get the decisions. Well, the biggest thing that we usually find is that people, if you go into the acquisition report, these brands that otherwise no one would have heard of have a ton of direct traffic conversions. And so that's just useless, and it can't be true. It can't be true that if you have some mywebsite.com that no one would know, it's not like you're viral, and you're getting 100 sales a day, 80 of them are direct. It's just not,
Mhm.
there's no premise, no hypothesis where that's accurate. So that one always is great for us, because we can say, well, we can pull up our clients and say, okay, they're showing that same direct, but we actually, because we track direct, if it's actually direct, and we'll say our direct, is like 5%. Is those the people, and those directs, you click on them and you can see, no, they really came from advertising. So as a marketer, if you see a lot of direct, that should give you anxiety, because if your brand, your owner or your boss is in there seeing direct in the acquisition, they're going to be like, well, why do we need you?
Yeah,
Unless you're
good
doing a
point.
lot of great branding, I guess. The other thing is it usually heavily discount Google. It's off, but with Facebook, it heavily discounts the most important piece of Facebook, which is top of the funnel. Top of the funnel is how you fill your funnel in the cold traffic prospecting. But the way that they measure for the acquisition report, it's always massively underweighted to the two, sometimes like 10 to 20x less revenue reported than what's actually there. That's consistent. That's not just like one like massive one that happened. The more revenue you do, and the more spend on Facebook at top of the funnel on cold traffic, the more the disparity in the amount of revenue that the acquisition GA4 is going to miss. And so that's trouble, because you need the top of funnel. The top of funnel already has the time lag. So the bosses and the purse holders and the budget people are already like, why are we spending on this? And as a marketer, you need new eyeballs in, you need cold traffic. It just takes time. So if they're in there poking around at GA4 and seeing this low, in their minds, low return or negative return, that's just a firefight that you don't want to have to battle. So it goes back to expectations as an agency. You got to like set, we're going to put X% of the budget into cold traffic. You cannot look at GA4 for these results. You need to
Mhm.
give us this much a time frame and then judge us. You need to get those like captured on like a recorded Zoom in like a decision log where everyone's who's at the meeting. We all agree this is how we're going to do it, because then the people get amnesia. Sorry, I'm getting off GA4 here. It's just, that's the pain point that people have because of GA4 is they got direct problems and they got way under attributed Facebook. And then new verse repeats off because they use new verse returning user, which I think is 2 months. Sometimes it's less. Sometimes you can go in a setting and make it more, but you're going to think you're driving new people to the site that aren't new. They might have just gone away. Like I'm not rifling through the 500 different places I might buy stuff all at Christmas. But then it comes Christmas and I could show up as a new user because I hadn't been there, even if I buy the stuff every year or I buy it biannually, and there's like, thousands of the same type of people return buying that are showing as a new user. And then you think, oh, I'm driving all this new stuff, and you're not. That's my three
Yeah, no,
strong.
and that's really important. I mean, it comes back to understanding your users, right? Because at the same time, that user who comes every Black Friday, like, is that really the type of customer you want that's buying all of your deep discounts?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but just understand it and split it out again, like in that sports analogy, right? That's a different target market that you're going to have a different strategy for based on how you measure profitability for that specific segment or cohort. And again, it all comes back to having good data, different ways to look at data, a nimble platform to bring that data into the decision engines, which are usually AI based and with the ad platforms. So, yeah, I think Wicked Reports probably fits into that pretty well. And then to plug my own tool with Optimizer, you can use all these different attribution windows and models and plug them into your rule engine strategies and automations
Mm-hmm.
and bring your profitability into the equation so that the target return on ad spend you set is actually driving profits as opposed to just more ROAS, but not necessarily profit.
Yeah, you have a lot of slick automations in there, and because a lot of time you get on and analyze an account that is not automated, and they miss opportunities a lot. A
Mm.
lot of keywords that are like they're either getting outbid or they've got so many campaigns with keywords overlapping, and then they're only getting like $10 of ad spend on a keyword that brought in 2 customers. I see that consistently. People be missing opportunities. And why is it? They'll be like, well, you got the same keyword floating around in 5 different campaigns, or your performance max is stealing it, or, all sorts of things that automation can help them catch and fix without even knowing.
Yeah. Well, this has been great stuff. I think I've learned a lot. Hopefully, the listeners have enjoyed this as well. If people want to learn more about Wicked Reports or stay in touch with you, what should they do?
So wickedreports.com, and you can click over on demos from the homepage menu header, and we got an interactive demo you can look at before you even talk to anyone. And then I'm on LinkedIn, Scott Desgrosseilliers. You can find me there if you can spell it, or maybe Scott Wicked Reports, probably be easier.
You know what? I'll be honest. That's exactly how I went to your LinkedIn profile.
I just thought of that right now. I was like, boy, no one's going to type all that in.
Yeah. Well, Scott's name is right there at the bottom of the screen. We'll also put it in the show notes, and we'll put in the links to Wicked Reports as well as to his LinkedIn profile. But Scott, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom. I hope people do stay in touch with you and take a look at your tool. And then if you've enjoyed this episode, please hit the subscribe button at the bottom. Go ahead and give this a like, share it with your friends, and we hope that you'll watch the next episode as well. So with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you for the next episode. Take care.